A good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to round 11 of the Formula Alpha Championship, then the AROC Racing League's Touring Car Championship for 2025. It is great to be back in the comms box. I was briefly behind the wheel in practice there. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but we're here in qualifying here at Monaco, the streets of Monaco, an infamous venue to go racing at, and it looking rather splendid, if I do say so myself. We're on board at the moment with Andrew Whitehead. He's obviously in the mix for some decent points in this championship, currently running in fourth in this session, an all-important session as well, of course. Qualifying is rather more important perhaps than any other circuit here at Monaco. It is crucial to get that fast lap in here at a circuit where it's oh so difficult to overtake. We're on board with Andrew White at the moment at 140.1. David Chelly currently leads this session with 137.0, just ahead of Matt Daly 138.1, Alan Matthews 139.2, and Andrew Whitehead 140.1 there. Just over 8 minutes to go in this session. Apologies for the small intermission in commentary there, just making sure that we are getting our engine audio through here in Monaco, because it is oh so important. The sound echoes off the walls here, those ever-encroaching, very tight circuits, so those walls are very close to you, and you're going to hear the engine sounds echoing off the sides of the track. Actually had a couple of laps here in practice just to get a bit of a feel for things, see how things are running. Actually my first time driving around Monaco in a regular tin-top car. I've only ever done it in single-seaters in the games, of course, and interesting. Of course, I was in the Alfa 75, whilst all these guys were in the rather quicker Juliet WTCR, which meant that I had to pick my moments to get out and put a lap in, because I didn't want to hold anyone up, of course, during practice. Was able to get a couple of laps in, at least posted a 156, so nowhere near what these guys are able to do. That is down to primarily performance, well, I'm not going to say primarily the performance of the car, but mainly my lack of abilities and skills, which meant that it was a 156 in the Alfa 75. Guy Shawbrick at 144.2, just behind Steve Knight and Will Inglis as well. Great to see a few of the drivers back off their holidays, I think, so I hope everyone had a lovely time as we get back into the really fun stuff. You can, you have to sit through your holidays, but now you get back to what you've actually been looking forward to all this time. Some racing in the AROC Racing Leagues. Just under 5 minutes to go in this session now. David Chelly still leading at 137.0. He improves on his previous run, but it was a purple middle sector that really made a difference that time out, though. We're on board with Matt Daly. He heads across the line in just a moment. Personal best sector 1 comes across the line to bring an end to lap 138.0 to beat. He doesn't quite achieve that on this run, but I'm sure he will, as we have a few more attempts left in the running in this session. Steve Knight doesn't improve on this lap, because that was an out lap, and he looks to push on towards Will Inglis just in front of him, and maybe try and snag a few points away from that mid-pack action as well. Steve Knight has been very strong on the attendance side of things through multiple rounds in both the Formula Alpha and the touring car running, which means that he will be rewarded with a very fine amount of points towards the end of this season. Coming up next, though, is Alan Matthews. Myself and Alan Matthews nearly had a bit of a run-in as I was exiting the pit during practice. So I kind of slowed down, hesitated perhaps a little bit, and there was Alan Matthews not expecting me to be there. And luckily, I think he phased through me, so it didn't affect his practice running. Either way, we see Alan Matthews coming across the line there, 1:39.278. That is not his best lap, because that was also an lap for Alan Matthews. Next to come across the line there will be Guy Swarbrick. Let's see what he can achieve in this running. It's a 1:44 to beat, looking a little bit slower through the middle sector, so let's see what he can do now through the final couple of corners. Through Rascas we go, back onto the throttle for a bit of a brief squirt before you jump back off again, and you have one last stitch to the start-finish line there. As I say, bit of an eye-opener driving the 75. Obviously the Giulietta's a lot more capable, but still, I imagine, very interesting indeed for those of you who are used to the single seasons, because you have to treat this track completely differently when approaching the very tight, twisty corners of this circuit. Corners that in your brain, particularly if you're used to playing the Formula 1 games, you take absolutely flat out. Of course, you can't really laser scout this circuit, I suppose, so it's never going to be completely accurate to real life, but corners that you used to just be able to hang down, you know, maybe sit in 6th gear and just blast through without even thinking about the brakes or thinking about letting off the throttle. You have to treat very differently in these cars. The one corner that I will say is nice, and there's a corner we're heading through now. Heading through Hotel Chicane with Guy Swarbrick. As you run through this corner, you're carrying much less speed into it, which means, unlike the absolute land yachts of modern Formula 1 cars, these actually turn in quite nicely, I think, or at least the 75 did. It's a rear-wheel drive car of a different era, so it feels a bit different, but it's actually quite pleasant to navigate a car through that tight hairpin bend there, which cannot be said of a modern Formula 1 car. So certainly some perks of running some road cars around here. As we head through the Nouvelle Chicane, and now Guy Swarbrick just a little bit ahead of Will Inglis and Matt Daly, which this brings me on to another point about Monaco. It is so difficult, especially part of the game of qualifying really, is to get a bit of a clean run in, because as soon as you get on the back of the car and lap over pretty much, you can't find a way past. I think I let Alan Matthews through heading into Rascas, which is just about perhaps one of the few moments on the circuit that you could let a car through. It is a little bit different, of course. Another benefit of running in a touring car over a large single seater like a Formula 1 bit of machinery is that they are much smaller cars, as are our Formula Alphas, in fact. Much smaller cars, they do give you a few more options in terms of overtaking. Anyway, we stay on board with Will Inglis. He heads up Barrage now, just ahead of Guy Swarbrick. Through the hotel hairpin once more. I think I called it chicane a moment ago. Andrew Whitehead, though, in this session, just towards the dying breaths of the running, has had a bit of an issue and ends up back in the pit. That was running into turn 1. That was a 42-mile-an-hour collision with the wall, so wouldn't be surprised. Oh dear, big collision there, and just as I was talking about in practice, which involved myself, Alan Matthews there sat on the outside of the track, or on the inside of the track. That's where the pit exit is, and there's no prior warning from Alan Matthews, so you can't blame him there. The pit exit is rather unforgiving as Andrew Whitehead exits the pits. That's going to bring an end to both Andrew and Alan Matthews' qualifying. I think they're dashing out anyway. I think they might have changed some rules recently, which means that they might be able to get a lap in. The checkered flag has been waved there. It's all David Jelly is going to attempt to do. I don't think he needs to attempt to do much more, to be honest. 1:37.0, an almighty lap there from David Jelly. Up next to the cross line and to bound across the circuit and into the barriers, it is going to be Will Inglis. That brings an end to his qualifying. He can't improve anywhere with that run. Matt Daly then comes across the line in just a moment. He will be the first of our improving drivers if he can improve, and he does improve. It's a 1:37.572, an almighty run there from Matt Daly. That is a very impressive run indeed. That sees him getting close to David Chelly, but not quite close enough to make the big difference. And here we have Andrew Whitehead still on his outlap, of course. Don't know if he's going to get a fast lap in. Likewise for Alan Matthews. Will Inglis will have to settle for a 140.2. Steve Knight is still on track at the moment. No improvement so far through Sector 1 or Sector 2. He heads through the swimming pool chicane now with just one corner, or one set of corners left to negotiate. Up onto two wheels then for Steve Knight as he heads into the Rascasse with just one corner left. Have to thread the needle as you head through the final corner and back onto the start-finish straight. Steve Knight then looking to improve in this final sector to see if he can make progress in this session. Alan Matthews abandons the running, path-wise. End of qualifying not going the way that he would have wanted. He does improve through Sector 3, but it's not an improvement overall, unfortunately, for Steve Knight. He settles for a 142.1. Guy Swarbrick returns to the pits as well. That leaves us with just Andrew Whitehead out on track at the moment. Matt Daly is out on track, but that is an in-lap. Let's see what Andrew Whitehead can do. What he can do is abandon this lap, which is going to bring an end to the qualifying running here at Monaco. We'll join you in just a few minutes as we get ready for race 1. Welcome to the grid here at Monaco, ladies and gentlemen. Round 11 of the AROC Racing League Touring Car Championship is about to get underway in terms of the racing action. Just under 30 seconds now until lights out, and it's David Shelley, Matt Daly on the front row of the grid, Andrew Whitehead, Alan Matthews on row 2, Will Inglis, Steve Knight row 3, and then Guy Strawbrick completing the grid here at Monaco as we run up into Saint-Devote in just a moment. Such an intense braking zone to nail, and perhaps crucial lap one can make the difference at this difficult to overtake out circuit. Either way, we do have 6 red lights on the gantry, the revs rise, and we are away for race 1 here this evening. It is a good start for everyone, in particular though Will Inglis there looking to find a way past Andrew Whitehead, and he does so, braking zone into Saint-Devote. That's a remarkable overtake early on in this race for Will Inglis, and he seeks blood. I think he is absolutely flying along. He's now on the back of Matt Daly as we head up through to Massenet in just a moment there. Will Inglis, what a start there for the driver in the blue and yellow liveried car. But it's so crucial in these races. 25 minutes is a sprint, but it's a fairly long sprint when all is said and done. So it's good to get yourself in as good a position as possible early on in the running. And he has managed to do that. He's made up for his woes in qualifying, I think, has Will Inglis. He has got some pressure though as he makes contact with the wall as we run through the hairpin there. And that puts Andrew Whitehead right on his rear wing. This is allowing Matt Daly and David Shelley to escape down the roads. The likes of what we've seen with Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz in the Williamses, we're seeing now with Will Inglis. Our 2 race leaders absolutely walking away, while Will Inglis has to defend from Andrew Whitehead and Alan Matthews very close behind as well. Heavy braking zone into the Nouvelle chicane, and now we can see Alan Matthews having a look at Andrew Whitehead, gets a bit of a better run, does Alan, as we exit the chicane complex, and just decides, you know what, I'm going to hang back instead as we run through the tunnel. Oh, we don't run through the tunnel at all. What am I saying? We're heading up through Tabac and into Rascasse in just a moment. First though, it is going to be the swimming pool chicane, and there we go, into Rascasse. Was there contact? I don't think there was. Maybe there might have been contact, or I think there was just a bit of a lock-up there for Andrew Whitehead, and that is disaster in this race. On lap 1, he tumbles back down the order, and it is last place for Andrew Whitehead. What a drift there from David Shelley. That is 4 points there for style. Cracking works there as he carries up through by Rivage now. And what a nice way to get the car rotated into the corner. Are we seeing that again as we head through Massenet? I think we are just a little bit. Rear tyres are going to be cold on these cars, and what that is going to cause is the likes of those sliding moments there, and also the locking up moments there for Andrew Whitehead. I was actually getting a little bit of it in the 75 in practice as well. The back end, you really have to stamp on the brakes at some parts of this lap. Of course, you pick up a little bit of speed before you have a very tight, twisty off-camber corner. You really do have to stamp on the brakes to get the car slowed down, and that can upset the cars, especially if the tyres are cold. And I think that's what we're seeing on the back axle of both Shelley and Whitehead's car. They do both carry on though. Andrew Whitehead a little bit further behind than perhaps you'd want to be. Contact with the barriers there for Will Inglis and for Alan Matthews as they run through Portier and into the tunnel. They are able to carry on though. We're already seeing a fairly big degree of separation between our field as David Shelley happy to walk away with it. Alan Matthews runs in P4, Matt Daly runs in P2, and Will Inglis in P3. With that pressure though from Alan Matthews, these are our closest cars out on the track at the moment. I have a feeling this could be a race of attrition, ladies and gentlemen. And as we head on, everyone is pushing along. David Shelley, in fact, is certainly no stranger to the barriers here at Monaco as he makes contact with that wall, continues on with a 4-second margin down to Matt Daly. We look further back then and we see it's Will Inglis against Alan Matthews as they head on to the start-finish straight now. David Shelley perhaps unsurprisingly pushing on and continuing with some remarkable laps. 1:37.0 for David Shelley, which the astute among you may remember, that is exactly what he did in qualifying. So already 4 minutes into the running, with a full tank of fuel on board, he has posted the qualifying level lap there, and it goes from bad to worse really for Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Whitehead making contact with the wall as he runs into Rascasse once again. He continues on, but is quite a ways behind, and not where he wants to be at the penultimate round of this championship, I am sure. Here we see running through the tunnel Will Inglis and Alan Matthews as we drop down towards the Nouvelle chicane once more. One of the highest speed sections of the circuit is the Nouvelle chicane, or at least to run into it. Bit of a lock up there for Alan Matthews. He does gain time though on Will Inglis, and it all goes wrong. A rollover here at Monaco. You do not see that every day. He is able to continue on. His car pretty destroyed after that run-in with the barrier though. What a shame for Alan Matthews, pushing on rather nicely, but it brings an end to his competitive running, at least because that car is going to be in a rather sad state after that small incident there. I mean, I'm glad he was able to get it back onto four wheels at least. It's not always a given that you do see that, especially not always given that you see that here at Monaco in some rather lower speed cars as well. We did see that in qualifying. We did see that between involved Guy Swarbrick at least, as we see Alan Matthews jumping back on to the track down the start-finish straight once again, just ahead of Steve Knight, and then not too far behind at all is Guy Swarbrick. If we have a couple more incidents, all of a sudden Andrew Whitehead's going to find himself back in the midst of some racing action. We continue on then, over 5 minutes completed of this race, and it's Matt Daly who currently leads this championships, 2 points ahead of David Chelly. So as it stands, David Chelly will take back the lead in this championship. I did mention, folks, it is very close indeed in the touring car running in Austria last week and the week before that, and I'm going to say it again, look at how close it is, folks. Just 2 points separate these two drivers as we head into our final round in just a fortnight's time. But it's going to change as we head into race 2, so it's really still very much up in the air. Alan Matthews still ahead of Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Whitehead not quite got as much of a foothold in this championship as he does in the single-seaters, but he would have been hoping at least to push towards Alan Matthews, and that is not going to turn out to be what you think pan out. So Andrew Whitehead actually does get ahead of Guy Swarbrick, who had a rather big incident, it must be said. He's been stopped for a little while. Let's see whereabouts he is on circuit. There he is, heading through Portier now. So that was actually through the exit of the hotel. That is not every day that you see a bit of an incident there. Either way, he is able to carry on. It's a little bit further back than he would have wanted. That promotes Andrew Whitehead, though, into 6th position in this race. Meanwhile, David Chelly leads this race ahead of Matt Daly. Matt Daly still posting personal best sectors, just not quite able to get close enough to David Chelly. David Chelly is still posting purple sectors lap by lap. I think he might have had a bit of an incident through the middle sector. The previous lap has had a brief brush through the wall on this lap as well, but he's still in the low 137s. If he hadn't have had that slightly off middle sector, it would have been another fast lap of the race. We see Alan Matthews making brief contact with the wall there as he tries his best to close up to Will Inglis. And the reason why I think we're seeing a fair bit of contact from Alan Matthews at this point is he's doing a very good job closing up to Will Inglis, it must be said. But the damage on that car is rather insurmountable. I think that is a red rear wing on my damage indicator, which means that there's pretty much no downforce on the front end of his car. That car is not going to be a pleasant car to drive. So to say that he's driving it whilst still putting pressure on Will Inglis, that is a strong effort from Alan Matthews so far in this race. There we see Will Inglis just about getting stopped for the swimming pool chicane there. He does continue on as we run through to back now, bounding through the curves there. I get the feeling that the surface of this track model isn't the smoothest, or at least not quite as smooth as it suggests when you look at it. One of the lovely little features I love of this track model though is there you can see on the TVs, folks, the actual race that we're watching there. So they have modelled the cameras, and you can see that if you want to watch TV through your TV. Not quite sure why you'd want to do that, but you can do that, I suppose. As we head back onto the start-finish straight there, Alan Matthews using as much of the track as he dares, headlights on as well, but he does keep it pointing in the right direction as he tries his best to close up. These are actually posting personal best laps of this race so far. That is very impressive to say that, at least in Alan Matthews' case, he has got a fair amount of damage on his car. Change of position further down the order, in fact, as we see Guy Swarbrick gets back past Andrew Whitehead I think that might actually just be a timing error by the looks of things. We will see if that is the case. No, that is for real. 8 seconds now between Andrew Whitehead and Guy Swarbrick. I think Andrew Whitehead just really not having a good time of things out here in this session. He was looking fairly strong in practice and qualifying, so it's a shame to see that race one not panning out his way so far. Still got 50 minutes of this race to go, and of course race 2 or reverse grid race coming up in a little while, so still another opportunity to score some decent points here in Monaco. Back on board with David Chelly, our race leader, of course. 9 seconds is the gap between David and Matt Daly, as we see David Chelly actually posting a 1:36.8, so improving upon his qualifying. On the side of his car as well, David Chelly leading this race, has to jump back into the pit. That is going to bring him a lap down. That is rather substantial. We haven't really seen any racing mistakes from David Chelly for a little while, and he's looked pretty impervious, all things considered, in the later stages of this championship. This is going to pretty much give it to Matt Daly on a silver platter, though. At this point, he drops down a lap with that, so that is not ideal at all for David Chelly. He doesn't drop down a lap. In fact, he jumps back out on circuit ahead of Willie Bliss, but 7 seconds down on Matt Daly. I would have thought it would have taken... No, it does take it back. Okay, the time system just a little bit slow on this end. At least that dropped him down into 4th position now. That promotes Matt Daly into the lead of this race. Willie Bliss running in P2 then is now ahead of Alan Matthews, also on the podium. And this all of a sudden is going to be a battle for P2 in this race, folks. That rather hots things up, doesn't it, though? Commiserations to David Chelly. That's the type of mistake that he cannot afford to make at this stage of the championship, really. He's 2 points separated from Matt Daly, which means if he'd stayed in the race lead, he would have built up and converted that gap in what would have been heading into our third but final race of the season. Instead, Matt Daly is going to expand his lead over David Chelly in the championship, and expand it rather considerably, it must be said. So this is not ideal for David Chelly. He will be kicking himself in the cockpit of that car, I am sure. It just goes from bad to worse as well. He dropped down to 5th as the timing system updates. He might drop down a little bit further as he comes across line. We will see. Either way, disaster for David Chelly, and a bit of a turnaround in fortunes for Matt Daly, as well as these two who are in the form of Willie Bliss and Alan Matthews continue to battle on as they now fight for P2 in this race. Here we see the pressure still continuing on. They've been trading very similar lap times, Willie Bliss and Alan Matthews. Throughout the course of this race, realistically, which is impressive given that Alan Matthews has a substantial amount of damage carry on his car. But there we see Willie Bliss on the last lap, 140.6, Alan Matthews 140.5. Alan Matthews having another brief glance with the wall there as we head through the swim pool chicane. A very common point to see it, of course. He does continue on, but I am sure is going to be beating those tyres up, shall we say. Those tyres have had a long run. Everyone is running on the soft compound of tyre, apart from Guy Swarbrick, who's opted for the mediums in the touring car running around here at Monaco. It should be okay to last all the distance on the softs. Alan Matthews, though, looking like he's struggling just that little bit more. One thing to note is, of course, with that lack of downforce he has on his car, with that extra damage, it's going to exacerbate the problem of tyre wear as those tyres skid across the track more, as he locks them up more under braking as they scramble for traction just a little bit more than everyone else's car. He's only going to wear out the tyres more, which means that he has less grip earlier in the race, and it's a rather self-fulfilling prophecy as it continues later on into this race. Just 10 minutes to go now, and Alan Matthews is doing a good job of trying to keep up with Will Inglis, but it must be said the momentum is rather swinging in Will Inglis's favour at this point. David Chelly's had a big issue in this lap apparently, and there he is. It is Steve Knight versus David Chelly. I am sure they were side by side, or at least attempting to go side by side as we run down to the hotel chicane, and it rather goes wrong for David Chelly, although very courteously David Chelly is waiting for Steve Knight. Although, is that going to cost them, as we see Steve Knight not able to get the car corrected this early on? David Chelly now heads underway. Is he still waiting? No, that's caught up Guy Swarbrick as well. That now promotes Andrew Whitehead all of a sudden into 4th position in this race. A couple of seconds ahead of David Chelly. Guy Swarbrick into P6, and then Steve Knight has been parked for a little while, now drops down to P7. That promotes Guy Swarbrick, but that was the... Oh, wow. Steve Knight, you have been practicing that corner, haven't you? That is some impressive arm work there. Either way, Andrew Whitehead heads into the Nouvelle chicane, running in P4, which, if you'd asked me 10 minutes ago, would you predict that Andrew Whitehead would be ahead of David Chelly in this race? I would certainly not say that, but now we're going to see these two battling it out for P4. This has been a bit of a turnaround for Andrew Whitehead, hasn't it? As we head up through the swimming pool chicane and into Rascasse in just a moment. Andrew Whitehead is going to be looking over his shoulder because there is former race leader David Chelly beginning, or at least attempting, to mount some pressure on the red and white livery car. We see Andrew Whitehead still maintaining a lead on David Chelly, and as we head into the Nouvelle chicane, but just look at how much speed they were trying to scrub off their cars as we headed into the left-hander there. God, so alive as they were doing that, and they look rather lucky, I'd say, to get the car slowed down into the Nouvelle chicane. Now, it looks like Will Inglis has had a bit of an issue out on the track. We'll catch that in just a moment, but I think we could be getting an overtake here as late on the brakes goes David Chelly. Andrew Whitehead pretty much welcoming him past around the outside there into Rascasse. But what an overtake. It's never an easy feat to get an overtake performed here at Monaco. Nonetheless, into the penultimate corner, and then go David Chelly into 4th, Andrew Whitehead running in 5th at the moment. Will Inglis then currently in 2nd, has Alan Matthews for company, as he's had for quite a while in this race. Alan's not found a way past just yet, but we saw Will Inglis made a bit of contact with the wall. That could cost him this late on in the race. David Chelly, meanwhile, has his own bit of contact with the wall, is able to continue on ahead of Andrew Whitehead now. Meanwhile, haven't seen him for a little while, Matt Daly running in 1st in this race with a nearly 40-second gap to P2, an almighty run at Daly. 5 minutes left in this race. Matt Daly still leads and still posting personal best sectors. Guy Swarbrick and Steve Knight having an incident and, of course, having multiple incidents in this race and jumping into the pits. But we see Matt Daly leads from Will Inglis by 42 seconds. Will Inglis has been doing an almighty job, as you've been watching, there to keep Alan Matthews at bay. And we'll see if Alan Matthews has anything up his sleeve in the final few minutes of this race. Here we see running through Matinee, and this was one of the points on the circuit which really kind of caught me out on a few moments. I didn't actually have a skirmish with the wall, but rather close. I've said rather a lot tonight. I got very close indeed on a few occasions, as we see Will Inglis here heading through the hotel hairpin. Oh dear, that is Alan Matthews up on his roof for not the first time this evening. That puts him in the pits as well. That is a terrible shame for Alan Matthews, who rolled once, of course, this evening and was able to continue on. There is my rather ruined 75. Was able to continue on, but now, after putting in an almighty effort to close up the gap to Will Inglis, to put pressure on and potentially fight for P2 in this race, sat quite comfortably in P3 as well, so was guaranteed a podium pretty much. He now finds himself behind David Shelley, and that is a disaster for Alan Matthews. Seemingly came out of nowhere as well. It was just running through the hairpin, which really caught him out. And now, even with more downforce on his car, I think it might be cold tyres, he makes contact with the wall at Matinee, which is what I was discussing before we saw him tumble onto his roof, is that it is quite a high-speed entry into that corner. But of course, these cars don't have the downforce of likes of a single-seater or a Formula One car, and you do have to screw off that speed, which is not a familiar feeling, at least here at Monaco, where, of course, in a Formula 1 car, it's pretty much flat out. This disaster, though, for Alan Matthews. This now means that Matt Daly leads by 45 seconds, and we've gone from having actually a pretty close pack at the start of this race, for the first half of this race, to only 4 drivers on the lead lap of the race. And in fact, only just in the case of Andrew Whitehead and David Shelley. David Shelley now promoted into 3rd position, so when all is said and done, it's not a complete disaster in terms of the championship. It is this race. It could have spelled the end for... I'll try that again. It could have spelled the end of it, but at least now David Shelley still has the hope to close up that gap with a couple of race wins here or there, or just try to outscore Matt Daly. I'm sure he'll be taking some lessons into race 2 this evening, and then our final round at Catalunya as well. As we see David rotating the car with everything that it's got there, the back end just kicking out nicely. I do like the way that David drives. It rather reminds me of driving a Mito QV, especially if you've got rather nice tyres on the front and less so on the back. Ask me how I know. Back end can be a little bit excitable, shall we say, on a Mito QV. It is great fun, of course, but it does remind me of that in these cars, though, or at least in David Shelley's case, as we see him now heading down towards the Nouvelle Chicane in just a moment. Just over 90 seconds to go on the clock now in this race, and Matt Daly, who looked to be pretty comfortable and settled in P2, looked like he wasn't going to be able to progress, was just able to keep the nose cleaner. And I did mention at the start I thought it could well have been a race of attrition, and that certainly looks to be the case now, as Matt Daly has been rewarded for his fine racecraft. We didn't really see him in practice, we didn't really see him in qualifying. I think he was more present in qualifying than he was in practice, I'll give him that, but he has clearly done plenty of his own practice, or if he hasn't, it's just his experience and skill shining through as we head through the Nouvelle Chicane, briefly up onto 2 wheels, but most importantly not on his roof, unlike Alan Matthews. Matt Daly leads this race with an ever-increasing gap. This is a dominant display, and it just shows why he is leading this championship, even with some very fierce competition in the shape of David Shelley. He does have that couple of points advantage, and that advantage will grow as we bring this race to a close. Will Inglis then running in P2, heads through the hotel hairpin now, and missing the apex there. Perhaps that is wise, given that Alan Matthews seemed to nail the apex, and the apex didn't really enjoy that being done to it, so There we see Alan Matthews now down in P5. I believe Guy Strawberry's had a bit of contact with the wall, as has Andrew Whitehead, as has pretty much everyone on this lap. Seemingly, I suspect the soft compound tyre can just about do the 25 minutes here at Monaco, and it is beginning to give up. There we see the brake disc glowing red hot on David Jelly's car as he's running in at P3 at the moment, as we are now on the penultimate lap of this race. More bits of contact coming through as well. That is not phasing the likes of Matt Daly, who have led a very impressive drive so far in this race. There we see David Jelly heading through the Nouvelle chicane, back onto the throttle before you head into to back another corner, which encroaches upon you right after a decent amount of speed is built up in the car. It is so tricky to... Well, I've completely forgot the braking zones here. I must admit, I didn't get any practice or anything like that. I just jumped in and put in a lap. It was a slow lap. It was approximately 20 seconds off what... In fact, it was exactly 20 seconds off what Matt Daly and David Jelly have been able to do in this race, which goes to show why they are driving it, and I am talking about it. Either way, we head on to the final lap of this race in just a moment. Of course, this is only race one. We do have a few minutes of break, and then we jump into race two, our reverse grid race. Reverse grid racing here at Monaco, that is certainly going to be one to watch out for, as it does appear a couple of overtaking opportunities are present in these Juliettas. It is going to make for some brilliant racing, I suspect, here at Monaco to see that reverse grid action. It's all going to come down to that launch on lap one once again. As we see Matt Daly now starting the final lap of this race. As I say, that lap one launch is pivotal. That's what we saw for Will Inglis. Let's not forget, Will Inglis did not qualify in the absolute best position. Instead, he absolutely nailed that launch into Saint-Devant. No wheel spin, was able to get alongside with the likes of Andrew Whitehead, and through his own attrition as well, has now found himself running in P2. Either way, speaking of attrition, it's Matt Daly who's heading through the Hotel Hairpin once more. Up first, though, it is going to be Mirabeau as we drop down into the lowest elevation part of the circuit. Well, I'll say the lowest, not quite the lowest. Of course, that will be around about to back is the lowest elevation part of the track. All the elevation that you get in Beaurivage, you drop through the Casino Mirabeau complex, through into Porte, and then once again through the Nouvelle chicane. Of course, Monaco, a place in the world which they are constantly changing and evolving with the rise of land reclamation and new architecture here, there, and everywhere. Poitiers is a fairly new part of this country, this very small landlocked, well, it's not landlocked at all, very small country at least. There. And who knows, it could change in the future, but I'm sure Matt Daly certainly doesn't want it to change as we head through into Rascasse for one last time there. Matt Daly then finds himself in the wall. That is not going to faze him though, as he has just two braking zones to negotiate on this lap. He did not lead from lap one. That is not a given here at Monaco, but through immense skill and proper racecraft, Matt Daly is going to head on to the start-finish straight as our race one victor. Congratulations, Matt Daly. Victory there as he builds his championship lead. It was looking precarious at the start of this round, of course. 2 points separated him and David Jelly. He builds that up to just that little bit more now here. It's going to be around about 12 points if things stay the way that they are as we head into race two in just a moment. And we go on board now with Will Inglis, a driver who you would not have expected to be scoring in P... Well, maybe on the podium if the stars align, but to be coming home in P2, that's an even more impressive feat on his return to the AROC Racing League's action as well. So welcome back to the UK, Will. Welcome back to some proper racing action as well. There we see on his final lap, he does have Alan Matthews to negotiate. Alan Matthews very courteously getting out of the way there to allow Will Inglis to bring home the car, head through the penultimate corner, the second to last corner, but it will be second on the podium for Will Inglis as he heads back onto that start-finish straight now. As I say, started around about 4th or 5th on the grid, now finds himself up into second on the grid. That is an almighty drive there for Will Inglis. He brings home a P2 in this race. Now David Jelly started pole, looked further down the order, but has crawled his way back up into third. It will be commiserations, I suspect, for David Jelly, not finishing where he would have wanted to, but at least he does finish on the podium and still mathematically can fight for the championship. Andrew Whitehead then will be the last driver to bring it home. Was P7 for a long amount of time in this race, so while I'm sure we would have wanted much more from this race here at Monaco, he can be pleased at least with a P4 in the end. Then it's Alan Matthews P5, Guy Swarbrick P6, and then Steve Knight P7 as well. That brings an end to race one. We'll catch you in just a few minutes, ready for race two here at Monaco. Welcome back to the streets of Monaco, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are then. Race 2, our reverse grid race, is just about to get underway now. Here is our starting order. Is Steve Knight, Guy Swarbrick, Alan Matthews, Andrew Whitehead, David Chelly, Willing Bliss and Matt Daly. A reversal of the race 1 results there. So our race victor all the way at the back, Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick, lining up on the first row of the grid ahead of row 2 with Alan Matthews and Andrew Whitehead. The revs begin to rise as we are going to get underway in mere seconds now. Turn 1 is going to be one to watch out for, I suspect. It's 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away for race 2 here at Monaco. Decent enough launch there for Steve Knight. Alan Matthews gets up side by side with Guy Swarbrick, immediately jumps into second position in this race. David Chelly with a rather explorative line there into turn 1, shall we say. Now finds himself up in 2P3 ahead of Willing Bliss. There's contact between Willing Bliss and David Chelly, who nearly had a Kevin Magnussen and Sergio Perez style incident. We do avoid that though. Instead we see David Chelly and Alan Matthews making contact with each other. When all is said and done, Steve Knight still leads this race ahead of Alan Matthews. There is Willing Bliss in third, David Chelly fourth, Matt Daly's worked his way up into fifth, and Guy Swarbrick started second, dropping down to sixth in this race. Andrew Whitehead, meanwhile, not an ideal start for him. He tumbles down to seventh as well. Now this is perfect for Steve Knight. What he needs to do is just make that Giulietta as wide as possible. Overtaking's already very tricky here at Monaco. If he just makes that car just a little bit wider, he can keep Alan Matthews at bay. Alan Matthews so gets a great run on the exit of Portier and is now going to find himself in the lead of this race, with Willing Bliss following very quickly as well. I think Steve Knight has lost a lot of momentum on the exit of Portier, and that is going to allow Jelly through. Matt Daly as well, as we see some very tight running there into the Nouvelle chicane, but we are all through there, and there we see through goes Alan Matthews as well. Alan Matthews now leads this race ahead of Willing Bliss. Matt Daly's now into third, but I suspect Willing Bliss is going to want to fight for this one. Oh, David Chelly, big contact there into Sharon, that was actually. David Chelly now finds himself in the wall and into the pits as well. This is truly disastrous for his championship. Could this spell an end to his championship run? David Chelly wants to get out back on track as quickly as possible. David, we need to see you back in this running in order to keep this championship alive. This could be the major headline from Monaco. David Chelly bringing an end to his championship hopes. We'll see if that is the case though as we head on to the running with Alan Matthews. He leads this race by 1 second, a true reversal of fortunes compared to race 1, of course, where we saw Alan Matthews behind Willing Bliss for the entire distance in the race. And there we do see David Chelly out and onto the track. It is quite a ways behind the likes of all the other runners, but at least he is out on track, and if anything happens out in front of him, he will claw away some more points in this championship fight that he's in. Of course, we're in the penultimate round. Round 12 will be at Catalonia for our final bit of running in this season before we have a bit of a break and get ready for our second half of the championship running. Alan Matthews then is going to be the leader of this race, but only just because Willing Bliss is 7 tenths behind, but closer to Willing Bliss is Matt Daly. Guy Swarbrick has a bit of an issue with the wall there, but we go back on board with Willing Bliss, and there is Matt Daly putting the pressure on. As we can see, Matt Daly closing his head through to back in just a moment. Keeping the measure up now is Willing Bliss. As we head into the sector 3 part of the lap, it gets just that little bit more difficult to overtake once again. We have seen an overtaking move open up though, heading into Rascasse. Could we see that again for Matt Daly? He certainly has a look at it, has a look around the outside. Nothing he can do from this far back though. Instead we head through the right-hander and we jump back onto the start-finish straight. There we see Matt Daly getting a decent run there, closing up on Willing Bliss. He heads out towards the outside of the circuit, goes earlier on the brakes though than Willing Bliss. Nicely defended, and in fact it's too late on the brakes for Willing Bliss. Heads straight into the barrier, 43 miles an hour, and that brings a bit of an unfortunate turn of events really for Willing Bliss in this race. Matt Daly running in P2 now then. Willing Bliss has to forget about that though, because very close, very hot on his heels though is Andrew Whitehead, and Willing Bliss has no front wing whatsoever on his car. That is pretty annihilated in this race. He's going to struggle, is Willing Bliss, now to bring this car home for 20 whole minutes. He has got to suffer with that damage. Let's see if he can do that. Meanwhile, Andrew Whitehead closing up on him, and not too far behind at all is Steve Knight. At the front end of things though, it is going to be Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. Matt Daly has been released from Willing Bliss and can focus on closing down on Alan Matthews. as we head into the Nouvelle chicane now. Late on the brakes he goes, 7/10 of a second is the margin, make that 6/10 of a second as we head into the back in just a moment. Can he keep the pressure on in sector 3? He'll be certainly hoping to. I'm sure he doesn't want to echo the exact move that he did on Winning List, because he didn't really do a move. All that happened is that Winning List just all of a sudden vanished from competition, really. So I'm sure Matt Daly doesn't want to see that. He wants to get that overtake done on a track. And late on the brakes he goes into Raskas, has a look around the outside. Nothing he can do just yet as we head through that final corner once more. Winning List still running in P3 ahead of Andrew Whitehead. We'll look at that in just a moment, though, because the battle for our race lead continues on as we head further into this race. Having a look around the outside, Matt Daly potentially getting the move done into Mirabeau. Very untraditional to see a move performed there. Matt Daly isn't able to get that performed. Maybe into Portier, though. That is going to be the next big opportunity where the track does open up and offer a bit of an overtaking spot. Not if you're carrying more momentum, you can get that move set up heading through the tunnel and down into the Nouvelle chicane in just a moment. Having a brief look then is Matt Daly having a bit more momentum with the benefit of a slipstream as well. We go side by side and into the Nouvelle chicane. Later on the brakes goes Alan Matthews. Well defended there, Alan, as we head onto the exit now, down towards the back in just a second. Nothing that Matt Daly can do just yet, but he is oh so close. Less than 3/10 of a second separating him on the corner entry into Tabac. As we now run through the final part of the lap, the swimming pool chicane, it is swimming pool chicane, sorry, I can't string a sentence together this evening, let's just put it that way. It's rather warm in this room, I'm going to blame it on that. I feel like I'm in Monaco right now and I need to be in the swimming pool myself. Either way, we head through the final corner. Once again, Alan Matthews using the curb. In fact, that might have cost him a little bit of speed, but I think Alan Matthews has the upper hand in terms of overall straight line speed, because Matt Daly got that run, got a bit of a slipstream, had a bit of a tow, had a bit of an advantage, but backed out of it because he just realised, I think, that at the top end, he's not going to be able to find a way past. He's going to have to get creative, is Matt Daly. Certainly has the pace. He has the pace to rival David Shelley, has that pace advantage, I'd say, over Alan Matthews, has a purple sector from the previous lap even. But he's just not able to have enough of an advantage to get past Alan Matthews, who's putting up an almighty fight here as we head into Mirabeau. Down the inside goes Matt Daly, gets a wheel alongside Alan Matthews, but well defended. Fantastic racing from the both drivers there. Very aware of each other's surroundings, and they do continue on without contact as well, but nice to see the attempt being made there from Matt Daly. With the wall there for Winning List as we head into the tunnel. Once again, 4/10 of a second separating these two drivers. Who's going to get brave? We shall see. As a bit of a lock-up there for Alan Matthews, that gives a bit of advantage to Matt Daly. Apologies, accidentally unplugged the mic there. I think that was complete excitement, really. As we see Alan Matthews continuing on, a bit of a smoke there as Matt Daly started to show signs potentially of some understeer through that final corner. Either way, half a second is the margin between these two drivers. It has not changed for this past lap. Matt Daly posting a purple second on the previous lap. Let's see what he can do on this one as David Shelley goes from bad to worse, really, for David. He said at least he was still in the mix of things. He might be able to push on and score some points if someone else has some issues. But it's going to be a couple laps down for David Shelley and a ruined front wing as he makes further contact with the wall. This is disaster for the gold and white liveried car. Of course, a gold and white livery in celebration of his previous achievements in this championship. Instead, it's going to be a bit of a race to forget, a round to forget, really, at a pivotal time in the championship. We go back on board, though, with our two race leaders. They continue to scrap it out. And there we see Matt Daly behind Alan Matthews, as he has been for quite some time. As we run through Portier now, this is one of the prime overtaking opportunities on this track, but nothing that Matt Daly can do just yet, although he is having a very good look at things, though, as we drop down into the Nouvelle chicane. Has a brief look on the outside of the corner. Defending very aggressively is Alan Matthews. He darts across the circuit to make sure Matt Daly can't find a way past, and that upsets the car. He means he misses the corner, and there, down the inside, goes Matt Daly through to back for the race lead. I think Alan Matthews gives that corner to Matt Daly pretty much, in fact, citing his previous skirmishes with the track limits, shall we say. Matt Daly now in the lead of this race. What can Alan Matthews do to fight back? Certainly is fighting back well is Alan Matthews. As we head up through Massenet at the end of Beau Rivage here, 0.4 of a second separating these two drivers. Matt Daly is having a great run in this race, but I'm sure Alan Matthews wants to try and fight back. He has a brief skirmish with the barrier though. That is not ideal. That is going to cost him a bit of front end grip, a bit of downforce on the front of the car. He is going to be removed from that brief impact there, although I think everyone's got a little bit of damage on the car at this point in the evening's running. Standing at around about 1 second on this lap. Looking further back down the order, though, we can see Willingless and Andrew Whitehead are having their own little fight out on track. We saw them getting a little bit closer, Willingless dropping off ever so slightly in terms of pace in this race. Had a bit of contact with the wall earlier on, but has found a way back past Andrew Whitehead. We are going to see, though, I suspect, a bit of a battle between these two towards the end of this race in the second half of this, the second race of the evening. Through the Super Pool chicane there, just look at how close Willingless gets to the barriers here in Monaco. Both drivers carrying front end damage, in fact, so pretty level playing field when all is said and done. Willingless leading from Andrew Whitehead. They are doing an almighty job of bringing this fight to each other now. It's, of course, the fight for the podium, where you are rewarded with a pretty hefty amount of points, which are very crucial in these final stages of the championship. So let's have a look at how the points are shaping up after race one here this evening. Matt Daly extends his championship lead, of course, with 512 points. I can't remember last time we saw points in the 500s. David Chelly, 500 points on the dot there, so Matt Daly extending his championship lead over David Chelly. Alan Matthews, 219 points to his name, that is ahead of Andrew Whitehead, 164, who's ahead of Willingless, 119 of Andy Gregor, Jack Hodson, Andrew Bramall, Paul Millen, Greg Young, Steve Knight with 92 points to his name, so Steve Knight will actually jump ahead quite considerably in the championship standings after this evening. He'll jump to around about 7th place from 11th. And then we have Nathan Birch with 72 points to his name, Guy Shawbrick with 39, and Rose Oliver with 36. So Guy Shawbrick will also make progress and separate himself from Rosie Oliver, but will not be able to close up to Nathan Birch in this round at least. And I think a bit of commentator's curse there. Apologies, Guy. We've actually been pretty good on the commentator's curse front of this season overall. Might ruin things there, but apologies for that one, Guy Swarbrick. Either way, as we head back to the action front end of the field, it is Alan Matthews who leads from Willing Bliss, who leads from Andrew Whitehead. As we see Alan Matthews starting to not quite able to keep up with Matt Daly anymore. Once again, it should be a comfortable cruise home for Matt Daly, and we could have a 3-car battle for the podium here, and that will be very interesting indeed. Just look at the smashed windscreen in Andrew Whitehead's car as we continue on through towards the next lap of this race. Through the hairpin once more. Just look at how close Willing Bliss is able to get to Alan Matthews. Everyone on the soft compound tyre here, including Guy Swarbrick, so the medium clearly not proving to be fruitful in race trim. Soft should be enough to bring everyone home, and we see Alan Matthews ahead of Willing Bliss, ahead of Andrew Whitehead, and it's so tricky here to, well, it's tricky to overtake, but I think it's also tricky to defend here. I mean, I for one wasn't able to focus on bringing the car home just without scraping wall just by doing that. Never mind while I was commentating, never mind while trying to defend from a very quick car behind it as well. Obviously, Willing Bliss had a bit of contact with the wall there, and Alan Matthews really does have his work cut out for him. The roles have completely reversed from race 1. And we see Willing Bliss trying to find a way past Alan Matthews. Now Andrew Whitehead is in the mix as well. Of course, Andrew Whitehead not having the greatest of race 1s. He did find himself up into P4 in the end with a bit of chaos towards the end. And he starts this race in P4. Again, not an ideal start, but works his way back up to P4. He's not in the mix for the championship lead here. That is very much settled in this championship. 2 drivers on 500 points. But he was at least somewhat in the mix against Alan Matthews. That isn't going to be the case now, but he will be hoping to at least bring it home with some decent points there. Matt Daly, just a bit of a timing error there, fear not. Matt Daly does still lead this race ahead of Alan Matthews, Willing Bliss and Andrew Whitehead as we head back down towards the hotel hairpin once more. Just under 10 minutes to go in this race. In fact, make that 7.5 minutes on the clock, and then we'll have a lap on top of that, or however many laps to go will be the penultimate lap when we do hit 0 on the clock. Matt Daly then leading by 17 seconds now. That is an impressive turn of speed there. I think that's about what data actually thinks, more like 11 seconds. There it is, yes, 11 seconds is the lead between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly, and then we have Willing Bliss and Andrew Whitehead. Alan Matthews actually breaking away a little bit from Willing Bliss on this lap. Everyone has a smashed windscreen at this point in the race, I think, so if you are particular vendors of windscreens that are named after the material and a transmission type, you are going to be rolling in it after this Monaco round as you head through the swimming pool chicane once more. Driver trying to avoid the barrier with every cell in there being, I suspect, as I didn't manage. In fact, no, I think I did manage to do. I just had to take a bit of a cheeky corner in order to do it. I did also have Alan Matthews behind, so I was wary of being in his way, and I thought it would be a good idea to work my way through the corner and then just head into Rascasse on the outside of the circuit. Then as we have big contact between Alan Matthews and Willing Bliss, running into the Sandevot right-hander, and there caught up as well is Andrew Whitehead. A 3-car pile-up. Willing Bliss, Andrew Whitehead able to continue on. Alan Matthews, though, running in P2 for so long in this race, now finds himself in P4. That is bitter disappointment, I am sure, for Alan Matthews. He was very quick on the bottleneck to get into the pits. The car was on his side, and he realised, do not faff around. Get straight back into the pits, get back out on track, and try to pick up pieces wherever possible. I think he's going to end up behind Steve Knight in this race, which should at least be P5. Not that that is going to be a comfort, given that you were P2 at one point. Either way, we continue on. It's Willing Bliss running in P2 ahead of Andrew Whitehead. And Andrew Whitehead, his first podium of the weekend. So this is rather turned around in fortunes when all is said and done. He'll be running in P3. Decent amount of points to be taken from there. And it just goes to show this really has been a weekend of attrition, not just a race of attrition. It rather does up the stakes though, doesn't it? As we head into the dying stages of this race, because Andrew Whitehead all of a sudden is now battling for P2. He's battling for a spot on the podium, but now it's going to be for 18 points in the championship standings that Willing Bliss certainly wants to ensure that he can take. Separated by a second, these two drivers in terms of their pace overall in this race though. Willing Bliss 1:39.1 on the last lap. That's actually his fastest lap of the race so far. We're at that pivotal point of the race where the tyres still have some life left in them, but the fuel tank has depleted fairly substantially, and that does mean that the time should still be pretty competitive. And if you're in a bit of rhythm and the tyres are nice and heated up, you're going to be posting some strong laps here. Willing Bliss then a 1:43 on that last lap, given the instance we had at Sandoval, but 1:39.1 last time out for Willing Bliss, whereas Andrew Whitehead 1:38.9 as his best lap overall. So slightly quicker in terms of best lap, but I think his current pace not quite there with Willing Bliss. Best lap of the race overall, by the way, David Jelly 1:34.1. That is blistering stuff there from David Jelly. Either way, we continue on. Matt Daly leads from Willing Bliss and Andrew Whitehead. See Andrew Whitehead filling the rearview mirror of Willing Bliss as we head up through to Rascasse. Now gaining roll substantially, must be said, on the exit of Tabak and on the run through to Bushkane as well. Contact there for Willing Bliss with the barrier. Now he's kept the car pointing in the right direction, but more crucially, that is going to cost him plenty of momentum as we run up towards Sandoval now in just a moment. Can he keep the momentum going? We will have to see. There we go. Must be said, Andrew Whitehead looking very close indeed to run through Mirabeau there. I've got to be very wary though of going side by side through Mirabeau, because we've seen just how wrong, sorry not Mirabeau, Rivage, we've seen how wrong it can go here at Monaco, involving these two drivers in fact. And we see Willing Bliss still ahead of this battle. The question is for how long, because Andrew Whitehead is looking rather poised to try and find a way past. Interestingly, after all the damage that Alamati's car has sustained in this race, Andrew Whitehead actually has more damage on his car. So we'll see if he's able to continue on. Willing Bliss building up the gap on the exit of Portier. I believe, yeah, there has been a more contact for David Jelly. David Jelly suffering in the very back end of the field with no front wing at all. It just goes to show just how much experience you need here at Monaco. I think that's what we are seeing. I think we're seeing our experienced drivers who, obviously I'm not saying that David hasn't practiced, but these guys have years now of multiple visits to this circuit in various types of machinery. They know how this track ticks. And I think that is paying dividends at this point in the race weekend, as they might have a bit of damage, they might have some tyre wear struggles, they might be battling with low fuel, and other cars are out on track as well. And what that does mean is that they have the mental capacity to think a little bit more about the track, to think a little bit more on keeping the car pointing in the right direction, and I think they are winning out as a result of that. Either way, we head into Sandoval. Willing Bliss still ahead of Andrew Whitehead. Unsurprisingly, they were not personal best laps. We're in the 140s now, but these two still pushing on with just over 60 seconds left on the clock. no change then between these two drivers, but we are keeping our eyes peeled on the action between the red and white liveried car and the blue and yellow liveried car, because this is where all the fighting has been for quite some time in this race. We head for the tunnel once more, 30 seconds left on the clock. Any late brave moves we will see unfold in front of us. Let's see what they do as we head through towards the back in just a moment. Andrew Whitehead looking composed as he runs through the chicane and into the back we go. Bit of a puff of smoke there. I suspect that was just from some understeer from these cars. Of course, the front wheels on these cars having so much to do. You've got to put the power down, they've got to be stronger on the brakes, you've got to do all the steering. Plenty for the front axle of this car to think about. It is a great driving car, the Giulietta TCR, I must say, although I think front-wheel drive, high-speed action can be a little bit more frightful than some other types of cars, shall we say, here at Monaco, with the walls just bearing down upon you. The 75, with its soft suspension, its rear-wheel drive layout, gearbox in the back, of course, lovely to slide. It was a joy to drive. It was only my own skills letting it down. It was actually rather pleasant to drive here at Monaco. Here we see Wingless versus Andrew Whitehead continuing on, and it is Wingless who has a bit of a skirmish with the wall. Could that cost him the position? No, it gets very close between the two. Andrew Whitehead is right on the rear wing of Wingless as we head through Mirabeau now, and it's going to be the run down into the hairpin once again. But it is Wingless who manages to stay out in front. It is looking rather precarious though for Wingless, who has held on to P2 for some time in this race, of course, after Alan Matthews had some earlier difficulties. It is Wingless who's going to be rewarded with the podium. If he can keep his nose clean, he'll be rewarded with the podium, even if he can't. But it will be Andrew Whitehead who eventually finds a way past him. We're going to drop down to the Nouveau chicane in just a moment. And there it is, late on the brakes, too late on the brakes, I think, for Andrew Whitehead, as he pretty much relents the battle that we have seen for so long in this race. Meanwhile, we're on the penultimate lap of this race as Matt Daly and David Shelley make contact with each other. They do continue on. We're expecting contact between these two drivers. I just think we're only expecting to get them out on track for track position. That is not going to be the case in the end, because they are not going to be fighting. Dave Shelley is numerous laps down as Matt Daly starts the final lap of this race. We go back on board though with Wingless and Andrew Whitehead as they try to negotiate some lap traffic now, and very courteous of Guy Schulbrook to move out of the way there, and Wingless and Andrew Whitehead head back into Sainte-Devote. We are aware that though Matt Daly is on the final lap of this race, of course. Bit of contact with a wall there for Alan Matthews. Disaster in this race. It goes from bad to worse, really, doesn't it? Either way, we head back on board with Matt Daly and David Shelley, looking like they're battling each other. They can battle all they want, but it's not going to make much difference to this race finish, as they do actually make contact. Matt Daly, though, is going to be leading this race no matter what. Is his lead potentially in jeopardy? I don't think so. Either way, we head through the penultimate corner here. Matt Daly back onto the start-finish straight for one last time this race weekend. He will be rewarded with double race victory right when he needed it in this running. And race one wasn't too bad all in the end for David Shelley. Wasn't that much of a points deficit. Race two was though, and Matt Daly already has one hand on that championship trophy. We go on board though with Wingless and Andrew Whitehead as they head onto the start-finish straight themselves. Wingless leads this battle for quite some time, and he leads it across the start-finish line, but it's looking very close indeed as Andrew Whitehead gets a great run. It's too little too late though, and Wingless crosses a line, mere tenths ahead of Andrew Whitehead. 1/10, in fact less than 1/10 ahead of Andrew Whitehead. Congratulations for those two drivers. They fill out the podium with some fantastic action there as well. Alan Matthews heads into the penultimate corner then. A topsy-turvy race weekend, all things considered, but he does jump onto the start-finish line to take the checkered flag. In the end, he will be rewarded with P4. Shelley retires from the session, perhaps unsurprisingly. Guy Schulbrook comes home classified P6. Alan Matthews comes across the line in a P4, and we have a bit of a wait for Steve Knight as well. certainly an action-packed, chaos-filled race weekend here in Monaco. Very much enjoyed it. That is our penultimate round of the touring car running. Next week we're back here at Monaco in some more traditional cars as we go out with our Formula Alfas, and then after that is our final round of the H1 part of the 2025 running. I hope you've enjoyed watching Monaco as much as I've enjoyed commentating it. Steve Knight's here with his acrobatic arms once again as he jumps back onto the start-finish straight to bring the car home P5. Well, that brings an end to the racing action here this evening. Thanks very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and a good night.